Okay, now we finish up with our second reading, which comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 4 through 11. Brothers and sisters, there are different kinds of spiritual gifts, but the same Spirit. There are different forms of service, but the same Lord. There are different workings, but the same God who produces all of them in everyone. To each individual, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for some benefit. To one is given through the Spirit the expression of wisdom. To another, the expression of knowledge according to the same Spirit. To another, faith by the same Spirit. To another, gifts of healing by the one Spirit. To another, mighty deeds. To another, prophecy. To another, discernment of spirits. To another, varieties of tongues. To another, interpretation of tongues. But one and the same Spirit produces all of these, distributing them individually to each person as he wishes. Okay, so we're actually going to be reading, this is the beginning, for a few weeks anyway, we're going to be reading from 1 Corinthians, the end of that letter. So this happens every year when ordinary time begins. We spend, in year A, we spend a few weeks with the first part of 1 Corinthians. In year B, we spend a few weeks with the middle part of 1 Corinthians. And now in year C, we finish with the last bit of 1 Corinthians. And that's just the way the church has designed it. It's a pretty long letter. It's St. Paul's second longest letter after the letter to the Romans. So I suppose the church wants us to make sure we're spending time in it every year. It's a really good letter. You could read the whole thing in less than an hour, probably, if you read it all the way through. Really good. Okay, so what's the deal? There are different kinds of spirit. Okay, so the spiritual gifts. St. Paul is understanding that within the church at Corinth, so within the Christian community at Corinth, there are some problems going on, divisions and rivalries and these types of things. And different people have received different spiritual gifts, like what he's spoken about, and they use those spiritual gifts as a way to kind of elevate themselves above others. And specifically, they talk about these spectacular gifts, like the speaking of tongues, like miraculously being able to speak a language that they don't normally speak, similar to what happens at Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. Other people interpret it to be speaking the language that is only known by God, the language of tongues. In other words, to us it sounds like gibberish, but to God it is singing his praises or speaking his praises. It's unclear what exactly St. Paul is talking about. Some people believe that it's merely like me learning French when I don't speak French and I just suddenly know it. And other people think it is this supernatural divine sort of thing. Anyway, the people are like, look, I got this gift and aren't I so special? And so then they start speaking these languages or these tongues in the context of like the liturgical gathering, which is not what the liturgy is meant to be for, actually. And so Paul is writing to kind of address this, to talk about actually there's a bunch of different spiritual gifts. And notice the last one that he mentioned was, the last couple were the varieties of tongues and interpretation of tongues. So in other words, if he's writing in a hierarchical kind of way, tongues falls toward the end of the ladder or the bottom of the ladder and the interpretation of tongues, rather than being like the one great thing that we should all desire. And the purpose of that is not to point out that we shouldn't desire it at all, but the purpose is like Paul is trying to get like, no, like there's a proper order to things. And so he's getting at this proper order, speaking of the charismatic gifts in chapter 12 and the body of Christ, speaking about the theological virtues, the theological gifts in chapter 13, and then eventually he'll speak about the liturgical assembly in chapter 14. So that's kind of what we've got coming forward for us anyway. So anyway, the spiritual gifts that we've all been given, and notice it, how is it that we've been given? Well, the Spirit produces all of these, distributing them individually to each person as he wishes. So it's not a matter of like, well, if I just do this right thing, then I'll be given this gift and I can kind of make a name for myself. No, it's like as God desires, this is what he does. So it's a free gift. It's a free gift. That's the point here. And that each of us has been given that free gift. What does he say? To each individual, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for some benefit. That we're all meant to live in a kind of epiphany. We're all meant to live in this. And next week we're going to hear this idea, this reality that he talks about being the body of Christ. That because we've entered into this new covenant with Christ, we're no longer individuals. We are individual members, but we are no longer just like I by myself am this guy. No, like we're part of something that is much bigger than just ourselves. We're part of this huge, massive body of Christ with Jesus Christ as our head. And so to understand that we are all meant to live with this sense of like, okay, I'm a member of this body. How have I been equipped for the sake of bringing glory to this body and maybe even of inviting others to participate in this body? And so Paul says that we've been given the manifestation of the Spirit for some benefit, not for our own personal private use, but always for the benefit of other people. In fact, the church has a way of distinguishing this. There's something that's called sanctifying grace, which is for us to be saved, for us to become sons in the Son, members of the body of Christ, that he gives me grace, and that's for me. It's for my salvation. He's given you grace, and that's for your salvation. But then he also gives us other grace. We could call it charismatic grace. So the charisms, the word charism means grace or giftedness, that we're given these gifts, these charisms, for the sake of building up the body of Christ. And so that's not for me. It's not for you. But it's for me to share with you and for you to share with me. And he goes through this list of like, look, here's the deal. Like, so people are given different gifts. Some are given wisdom. Some are given knowledge. Some are given faith. Some are given gifts of healing. And so like to understand, like, and he goes through all these different things. In fact, there's more gifts listed in Romans chapter 12. It's just worthwhile to point out, like, we're all different and we're all given different gifts by God. But the point is that we want to use these gifts for the sake of the kingdom. And when we use these gifts together, working together, not competing against each other, not trying to set up rivalries or different cliques or anything like that, when we use them together, what happens? The body of Christ grows on earth. That's a really powerful thing. So anyways, I actually encourage you to consider, like, what gifts have you been given by God, and how can you use those gifts for the sake of building up the church? And that's not necessarily natural skill. It might be natural skill, but those ways of being about the kingdom that fill you up with joy and energy. Those ways of being about the kingdom, of whether it's like hosting people in your house or teaching or studying and sharing that knowledge with other people or praying for others, and stuff happens that when you see it, like, it's fruitful, actually. Like, you see that something comes from it. And that other people actually tell you about it. Like, gosh, when you pray for me, I just feel it happening. When you host me in your home, I just love being here. I feel like I'm in this brand new place. Or when you make stuff with your hands, like when your craftiness, like it's beautiful, it's incredible, and it moves me to just be more filled with. So those kinds of things, like paying attention to those kinds of things, and saying, like, okay, this might be how God has gifted me, and I want to use those gifts for the sake of the kingdom. One little note here. Is that when Paul says to another faith by the same Spirit, the Bible scholars are clear that this is not, like, there's a kind of faith that is given to all believers in Jesus. That is to say, like, I'm given a gift of faith, you're given a gift of faith, and we have that gift by believing that Jesus is Lord. But there's another gift of faith that is we could say, like, the charismatic gift, that is like it's a supernatural thing, that a person is able to radically trust in the providence, the care of God, even in what seems to be impossible circumstances. So these are the people that, like Mother Teresa, who left her spiritual or her religious order without a strong plan to go and care for the poor, and what came of it was something supernatural, something incredible. And even within the course of that order, there were times where it's like they didn't have any food, and food miraculously showed up because Mother Teresa trusted that God was going to provide. So those kinds of that kind of faith. So it's not exactly the same. We're not all given the gift to have this supernatural trust in God, even while we are given the gift of supernatural faith in Him, supernatural trust that Jesus is Lord. So maybe it's a hopefully you can understand the distinction, and maybe hopefully I explained it well enough. Like that's hard. I like to teach, but I don't always do it the best. So anyway, so that's it. So beautiful thing. We'll hear more from St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians, first letter to the Corinthians, in the weeks to come. Once again, as always, this is a great Bible study. I just love it, being a part of it, studying the Word, and trying to share it with you as much as I can. And hopefully you can receive from it, and that reception can lead you to a deeper encounter with the Lord at Holy Mass when you get there on Sunday. So as always, I will look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you.